How DUI investigations actually work. Imagine you're driving home late at night. You glance in your rearview mirror and notice a patrol vehicle behind you. A few moments later, red and blue lights activate. Your stomach drops. Even if you've only had one drink or none at all, the situation immediately becomes stressful. But what actually happens during a DUI investigation? How does an officer determine whether a driver is impaired? What are officers looking for? And what happens after someone is suspected of driving under the influence? Today, we're breaking down the entire DUI investigation process from start to finish. Let's begin. Most DUI investigations start long before a vehicle is ever pulled over. Officers are trained to observe driving behaviors that may indicate impairment. These behaviors can include weaving within a lane, drifting across lane markings, driving significantly below the speed limit, inconsistent speeds, delayed reactions to traffic signals, following other vehicles too closely, or making unusually wide turns. It's important to understand that these driving behaviors do not automatically mean someone is impaired. There can be many explanations. A driver may be tired. They may be distracted. They may be unfamiliar with the area. But unusual driving behavior often provides a reason for an officer to take a closer look. If an officer observes a traffic violation or develops reasonable suspicion that something may be wrong, they may initiate a traffic stop. Once the vehicle stops, the investigation enters a new phase. The officer begins making observations. Many people assume the investigation starts when the officer asks questions. In reality, it often begins the moment the officer sees the vehicle. The officer may observe how quickly the driver pulls over. Did they respond appropriately to emergency lights? Did they stop in a safe location? Were there any unusual movements inside the vehicle? Once contact is made, the officer begins gathering information. One of the first things officers often notice is the driver's overall appearance and behavior. Are the driver's eyes bloodshot? Is their speech slurred? Do they appear confused? Do they have difficulty locating their license or registration? Can they follow simple instructions? Again, none of these observations automatically prove impairment. However, officers are trained to evaluate the totality of the circumstances. Every observation becomes one piece of a larger picture. Another factor officers may consider is odor. If an officer detects the odor of an alcoholic beverage coming from the vehicle or the driver, that observation may become part of the investigation. However, the presence of an odor alone does not necessarily indicate impairment. An odor may suggest alcohol consumption, but it does not reveal how much a person consumed or whether they are impaired. This distinction is important. Consuming alcohol and being impaired are not always the same thing. As the conversation continues, officers often ask questions. Questions may include, have you consumed any alcohol tonight? What time was your last drink? Where are you coming from? How long have you been there? The purpose of these questions is generally to gather information and compare responses with observations being made during the stop. Officers are looking for consistency. Do the answers make sense? Do they align with what the officer is observing? At this point, if the officer develops sufficient suspicion that impairment may be present, the investigation often expands. This is where field sobriety testing may enter the picture. One of the biggest misconceptions about DUI investigations involves field sobriety tests. Many people believe these tests are designed to determine guilt or innocence. In reality, they are investigative tools intended to help officers assess potential impairment. The most widely recognized tests come from standardized procedures developed through decades of research. 3 tests are commonly used. The first is called the horizontal gaze nystagmus test. During this evaluation, an officer asks a person to follow an object with their eyes while keeping their head still. The officer observes eye movement and looks for specific indicators that may be associated with impairment. The second test is the walk and turn. This divided attention exercise requires a person to follow instructions while performing physical movements. The individual may be asked to take a specific number of heel-to-toe steps, turn, and return. The officer is evaluating balance, coordination, and the ability to follow instructions simultaneously. The third commonly used test is the one-leg stand. The individual may be instructed to stand on one foot while counting aloud for a specified period. Again, the officer is observing balance, coordination, and divided attention. These tests are not athletic competitions. They are designed to assess specific indicators that research has associated with impairment. Environmental factors can also affect performance. Weather conditions, age, injuries, medical conditions, footwear, and physical limitations may all influence results. For this reason, officers generally consider field sobriety testing as only one component of the investigation. The investigation does not rely solely on a single observation or a single test. Instead, officers evaluate all available information together. In many jurisdictions, the next step may involve chemical testing. Chemical testing is often one of the most significant portions of a DUI investigation because it can provide measurable evidence regarding alcohol concentration. Two common forms of chemical testing are breath tests and blood tests. Many people confuse roadside breath tests with evidentiary breath tests. They are not always the same thing. A roadside preliminary breath test may be used as an investigative tool in some jurisdictions. An evidentiary breath test is typically conducted using equipment that meets specific legal and regulatory requirements. The exact procedures vary depending on local laws and agency policies. Blood testing may also be used in certain situations. This is particularly common when drug impairment is suspected or when other circumstances require additional investigation. Drug-impaired driving investigations can differ from alcohol-related investigations. Unlike alcohol, many drugs do not have a universally accepted concentration level that directly corresponds to impairment. As a result, officers may rely on additional observations, specialized training, chemical testing, and other investigative methods. Some officers receive advanced training focused specifically on identifying drug impairment. These investigations can be significantly more complex than alcohol-related cases. After all available evidence has been collected, the officer must make a decision. Does the evidence support an arrest, or does it not? Contrary to popular belief, an arrest decision is not based on a single factor. It is based on the totality of the investigation. Driving behavior, statements, physical observations, field sobriety testing, chemical testing, and any other relevant evidence. If an arrest occurs, the process does not end there. The individual is typically transported for booking procedures. Reports are completed, evidence is documented, chemical test results may be processed. The case is then forwarded through the criminal justice system for further review. This is another area where many people have misconceptions. An arrest is not the same thing as a conviction. The court system ultimately determines legal outcomes based on applicable laws and evidence presented. One reason DUI investigations receive so much attention is because impaired driving remains a major public safety concern. Every year, impaired driving contributes to serious crashes, injuries, and fatalities. Law enforcement agencies conduct DUI enforcement efforts with the goal of reducing these incidents and improving roadway safety. At the same time, DUI investigations must be conducted within legal standards and procedural requirements. Officers are expected to follow training, policy, and applicable laws throughout the process. Understanding how these investigations work helps remove some of the mystery surrounding them. Most people only experience a traffic stop or DUI investigation rarely, if ever. As a result, many assumptions are based on movies, television shows, or viral videos. The reality is often much more structured. A DUI investigation is a systematic process involving observation, questioning, testing, documentation, and decision-making. Every step is intended to gather information. Every observation becomes part of the larger picture, and every decision must be supported by evidence collected during the investigation. The next time you hear someone say they were investigated for DUI, you'll have a much better understanding of what that process actually involves. From the initial driving observations to field sobriety testing and chemical testing, DUI investigations are far more detailed than most people realize. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more videos explaining real-world law enforcement procedures, criminal investigations, and how the justice system works, be sure to subscribe and join us for the next video.